Hi there, we're here in Copenhagen at BioEurope. I'm here with Mette Agger. She's the managing partner at Lundbeckfonden Ventures. She's a life sciences investor based here in Denmark. And what I want to ask you first is, as an investor, what areas of biotechnology are you most interested in at the moment and why?
So we have a certain themes like orphan rare diseases where we are particularly interested, and we've also focused quite a bit on dermatology, which has been an area left aside for years but with clear unmet medical needs. Inflammation is an area we focused on, and we have actually not focused all that much on oncology and immuno-oncology. I think you really need to be specialists to work in that space. Important for us in our investment is that there's a real unmet medical need. That evidently increases the risk because there's a reason for no treatment has yet been developed, but that's the driver of what we're doing.
Okay, yeah. So you've decided not to go into oncology? Because
not decided sort of by design, but it's been important for us to very clearly understand the competitive profile and the novel modality that a particular program offers before considering oncology investments.
Okay. And in these main areas that you're working in, what would you say are currently the main challenges, like the main things where biotechs can make a difference?
So I think there are a number of, for instance, orphan rare disease spaces where a lot of work is needed to understand the disease and different categories of diseases. A number of these diseases are due to genetic defects, and pending the type of genetic defects, the phenotypes actually become quite different, and the therapeutic approaches are likewise quite different, or it's likely that you have to take different therapeutic approaches to really getting that separated and understand the basic data, and that mining as you build your project is something where I think biotech actually really can contribute in dialogue with academia and clinicians.
Okay, yeah. And so we're here at BioEurope. There's obviously a lot of conversations about how Europe compares, I guess, to the US, which is always the reference. And you also invest both in European and US based companies. So from your point of view, what are the main advantages of having a biotech based here in Europe?
So I think there's evidently working out of Europe a closeness that's important for your investments, in particular if you're really involved in them. There's an awful lot of good science in Europe, and we always talk about what's better in the US, but I think in reality the science has a very high quality, and as we discussed yesterday at the plenary session, I mean the whole DNA helix work, the antibody invention, the CRISPR technology is European. I think if you take the whole microbiome space, the European research here and the data mining is very, very solid. So I think that's one place where Europe has a real advantage and a competitive edge. I also think it's possible to do the early work and proof of mechanism and early development in Europe at lower cost than in US. But there is a point where getting the commercial strategic view on the opportunity is important, and that's earlier than what it used to be some years ago. And that's where we as investors and with the senior management team can actually contribute to the companies, so they get that focus, so they cross over and consider the US market and the strategic commercial opportunities earlier than what comes natural to European management.
Okay, and what about in terms of disadvantages of being based here?
I mean, the capital market is bigger in the US, and it's a more consolidated market. There are much more experience investing in biotech in the US. But we also again see an increasing number of European companies actually reaching out to the US and cross the Atlantic from a listing point of view. And American investors are coming to Europe to invest. So I think we'll see that evening out more over the coming years. But the public investor sector is much more is much stronger in the US, and that is an advantage for the US companies.
Okay, yeah, and there's definitely a lot of talk of how Europe is growing, getting
Sure.
there. So, and from your point of view, how has it evolved in the last, let's say, in the last few years, in the last 10 years, and how do you predict it will change in the near future, also the next decade?
So I think, on a number of fronts, we've had some very, very fruitful years in European biotech. You've had a number of VC funds raising new funds and bigger funds. I think you have actually done a listing of the number of companies that cross the 1 billion euro valuation mark. And suddenly we get above 10 of those. And so in that sense, I think you can list also products that are being developed out of Europe. So all of that sort of contributes to the whole ecosystem of biotech companies. I also think we see biotech companies doing financing rounds in Europe that are considerably bigger than what they used to be. Also thinking longer term in terms of building the right syndicate and the valuation to get to a real sort of value inflection point and meaningful clinical results.
Yeah. And since we're in Copenhagen today here, and you're based here in Denmark, so what's your view, particularly on the position of Denmark within European biotech?
So in Denmark, we have the luxury of having a number of pharmaceutical companies having their headquarters and a lot of their research and development in Denmark, and a number of these companies are owned by foundation like the Lundbeckfonden, where I come from, is the majority owner of the CNS company Lundbeck. So that long-term strategic majority ownership gives the company a solid investor base, and they cannot be acquired by other companies. And that creates a whole hotspot, you can say, of R&D expertise in the country that stays in the country. And based on that, we then can build the biotech companies, and you actually see a number of investors, both local and also like us and others, and you see a number of international investors coming to the region.
Okay, that's an interesting comment, because we hear about European biotech companies that start growing, that at some point they are acquired, and then there are some people will say that we don't reach the same level of the US where the companies grow higher. So do you think there's more potential to do that here?
I actually think you also see US companies being acquired when they get to a certain stage. So I think every company that's owned, whether it's private or public, are generally up for sale for the right offer. The uniqueness about a number of the Danish companies are that they actually have this foundation ownership, and it originates from family-owned businesses that have developed to a stage where the family decided to maintain the ownership and protect the ownership, and so they put the ownership into a foundation. So you can compare the foundation with a private person, so to say. And then that foundation's responsibility is to be a good owner and qualified owner of the company. That's unique to a Danish structure, and that simply means that without approval of the foundation, and in some cases the foundation can not even consider a sale of the company is never for sale. But it has to, but being listed on the stock exchange, it has to perform on par with everyone else. So it's completely transparent, and it can think long term, but it also has to deliver returns to the investors on a quarterly or annual basis. Okay. But we don't see them being acquired. But we will also see biotech companies being acquired, or companies that are not foundations owned being acquired when there's the right offer on the table.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you maybe tell me about a couple of success examples that you've seen coming out from here, from Denmark?
So I think you see Genmab is probably the first example that comes to mind. They've been building out of Denmark. Now they're international, but they're really been building out of Denmark. You have Bavarian Nordic, that's a sizable company by now out of Denmark, Zealand Pharma as a biotech company. And then you have the whole pharmaceutical group of companies also in Denmark. But we've also seen a number of companies actually going, not listing in Copenhagen Stock Exchange, but going directly on a US Nasdaq listing. So if you start listing it, there's a lot of companies that come out of Denmark.
Okay, great. Yeah. And so we've discussed a lot of different regions. I'm wondering, as an investor, how do you adapt your investment strategies to investing in different regions, so in the US, in Europe, or in particular countries in Europe?
I actually don't think we, in that way, adapt our investment strategy. I think we go with the right opportunity and what that opportunity needs to be developed. But we have a focus on building internationally from day one. So we have to address the US market very early on, have to get to FDA and start the conversation with the regulatory authorities in the US, likewise in Europe. So we don't have a regional strategy on our investment, and we also try to always work in international syndicates, because I think that simply gives the best of all worlds, and pharmaceuticals, it's the global business. It has to be a global product.
Okay, and I guess just globally, what are some of the trends or things you think it's worth looking for, to watch for in the next, let's say, 2-5 years?
I mean, I think there's a couple of spaces where we can expect a lot of development. I think the whole e-health space is coming up, the whole data mining, big data space is coming up. I think we have a unique position in Europe with our data records on patients, in particular maybe here in Scandinavia. All of us have a number and have a medical record, and mining those data, I think, will provide a lot of information in the coming years. So if you combine that with our increasing understanding of the disease, biomarkers, diagnostic markers, I think we will continue to be much better in much more focused treatments that are tailored to subgroups of patients with specific characteristics or phenotypes. So I think we see that combination of the big data and the much more focused treatments, that's gonna be big the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay, great. All right. Thanks a lot
You're welcome.
for your time, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.